Greetings in the name of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. It's Wednesday, December the 9th, and I hope your day has been blessed. Well, mine's blessed today because we have two very special guests as part of Wednesday Word today. TJ Hooper, who is a longtime member of our congregation and is the chair of the Endowment Committee for Providence United Methodist Church, is participating in today's Wednesday Word. And also joining us is Susan Cawthorn. Her role is Director of Ministry Services at the United Methodist Foundation of Western North Carolina. Their office is in Huntersville, right next door to the conference office. And so we're delighted that both of you are here today, and we're going to talk about the endowment for our church. And TJ, I want to start with you as the chair of the Endowment Committee. There may be some of our church members who don't even know that we have an endowment, or maybe perhaps what an endowment is. So would you give us a little background in that regard as far as the PUMC endowment is concerned?
Sure. Thanks, Randy. And thanks for having me and the opportunity to talk about the endowment. That's a great question because I'm not so sure before I got involved with some of the committee work at the church that I understood that the church had an endowment. And before I was asked to join the endowment committee, I'm not so sure I paid very much attention to what that was. So it's a great question to ask. And I'll try to answer it in kind of lay terms because that's how I think most people would want to hear it. And I will profess not to be an endowment attorney or an accountant that would, I'm not the expert necessarily in the logistics around the endowment, but the way I look at it is a fund that was created at one point for the benefit of the church. And it is a fund that generally continues to grow, and the principle of that fund is not diminished or reduced by activities of or decisions by the church or the committee. And the only the use for the funds is really to draw income or earnings from the endowment and apply those to the needs of the church in specific categories that are outlined in the endowment document, which the church has, when the endowment was created. And what I would say is the endowment's very personal to me, not just because I currently am the chair of the endowment committee. As I've been a part of understanding what the endowment does and what it means, it really is a reflection of past members of the church who really had the forethought and the wisdom to say, would an endowment how would an endowment benefit and work for Providence? And it really made me think, why would they want to do that? I mean, obviously, an endowment does provide some form of funds, but many of those members are either moved on from the church or maybe moved on to their next life. But it was important enough, Providence was important enough to them to leave a legacy that would continue beyond their time with the church. And that has impacted me because I'm the benefactor as a congregant, as a member of this church and my family for those decisions and the opportunity for an endowment to really work to improve Providence and my experience at Providence. And it's impersonal to me because I know the endowment will continue after I leave Providence. And so it really links the past to the present and the present to the future. And that's why I find it so personal. I think it's just a really, really neat, I like to use the term, really cool tool or idea that was created that really passes generation to generation, all the good things that Providence has provided to its members and will continue to provide. And with the knowledge that that legacy will continue, even though I may not be here to see it and experience it. I know that my children and their children's children and the same is true for other members will have the same advantages that the endowment has provided to me.
Well, that's well said, TJ, and it's a great celebration of those, as you said, past members who had the foresight to look to the future, and how we continue to benefit, and Lord willing, will continue for years and years. So you mentioned that the endowment instrument has certain areas of ministry that are focal points for the endowment. Can you share some of those with us?
Yeah, it's a great document. The document was put together with very specific goals. And the one thing I would say is it's different from kind of the annual budget that we put together that really address the immediate church's needs to pay bills and push certain programs together. The endowment kind of sits off to the side, and where the budget doesn't respond to certain needs, the endowment can step in from its earnings and income and really be a resource that can address things that we don't do in our daily church business or daily church lives. And the focus of the endowment is kind of broken into three categories. One is mission-based. So where the endowment has funds available from its income, and there are specific mission programs that aren't being addressed directly within the church budget, the endowment becomes a resource for that. And through a request from the missions committee, or even from a member who has a particular passion that the endowment committee feels like that is something that Providence would support through the endowment. The community cafe is a great example where they were seeking some funds and the endowment was able to provide for that. And that was outside of the current work at the time the missions committee was working towards. So that's one example where the mission aspect of the endowment comes into play. It also addresses certain capital needs as it relates to the campus of Providence. And when we talk about the campus, it's not just Providence, it's the parsonages, it's St. John's, it covers those areas. And where there are capital needs or certain expenses that, again, our budget's not addressing, we may find ourselves with a need that we need resources. And the endowment can address those. A great example of that is the replacement of our large HVAC system. That was quite an expense to the church and a very planful improvement over the course of years. And the endowment funded, I think, more than half of that expense, which was in the well into the six figures. And without those funds, I'm not sure where those dollars would have come from. Perhaps we avoided a capital campaign because the endowment was there really to provide for that. We've made improvements to Wolf Hall to address needs when the net was formed. Just the chairs in Wolf Hall more recently that are used for a multitude of events, that was funded by the endowment. And I think members of the choir would appreciate, and the members would appreciate understanding that when recent renovations were required of the choir due to flooding and other things, the endowment had funding that was available that wasn't readily available from other resources. So these are all things that didn't touch the principle per se of the endowment, but provided a financial resource through the income to support, really key needs of the building and the areas within the building. The last area that we focus on is kind of a catch-all where there are specific needs, again, outside of the annual budget process. And that does leave us some flexibility to address certain needs. I would say we really do focus on mission and areas within the physical plant and properties of Providence, but we do have some flexibility to consider other things if it's important to the church.
Now, these are important, for sure, areas of ministry and needs within the congregation. A question that some people might have is, well, how do we retain a principal balance of the endowment? It sounds like with all of these needs, we might suddenly go away very quickly. So what portion of the endowment is utilized for these kinds of things, and are there restrictions?
Yeah, so that's the amazing thing about the endowment. It's at first you may have a smaller principal, so there's not as much flexibility. But the way the endowment generally works is from the principal, there is a income that's derived on an annual basis, and it's a formula. It's a very small percentage of the overall principal, and generally the earnings, the investment earnings of the endowment outpace any income that you draw from it. So the idea is, as people give to the endowment, it grows through individual gifts. It also grows through the investment income that's through our foundation that we use, and so the principal just continues to grow and grow. But the flexibility and the benefit of the endowment is that we do have the opportunity to draw some income on an annual basis, and those funds from the income provide the means to do the activities and fund the projects that I just mentioned. So what we find is even though we're drawing income, we're not drawing it over time. We're not drawing it down at a pace that would reduce the principal, but it does allow us to have funds that support these various projects and needs. And the idea behind the endowment is, as the larger the principal, even though you're drawing a small percentage from that for income, the greater the income. So if you have a $100,000 endowment, your income is going to be very small. If you have a $5 million endowment or a $10 million endowment, obviously the income that you can draw from that is substantial. And at some point you can have an endowment so large that it really can sustain activities of the church that are that really provide flexibility, financial flexibility and security to the church. And that's really the end goal here. I think where we are in our endowment, it's mature enough that it provides a nice income to address certain needs. But what we would like to see is really for it to grow to the point where it can address, it can provide that financial security to the church that exists beyond the current income streams that we have.
So the benefit is that the principal stays, the interest and investment income, a portion of that is utilized for these other things, as you were saying. And what is the current balance of our general endowment?
Yeah, it's just over 2 million. It's a 2 point. I just looked it up. It's 2.1, maybe close to 2.2. The market's been pretty good the last month, and we've enjoyed the benefits of having a good market. We and Susan can speak to this better than I can. We do our investments are, I think, measured and conservative, and through the guidance of the Methodist Foundation, which has a sterling reputation. So we're not out in junk bonds or do anything risky. We're really managing the funds the way you would want to manage them. So over the long term, you're going to see growth just like you'd see growth in the market without taking on too much risk. So I would say our endowment is healthy enough to really provide funding. I think we have roughly $80,000-$90,000 a year right now that is available to fund different programs and needs. But I would also say for the period of time we've had an endowment, there's a lot of opportunity for it to grow and be larger. In fact, I would say the one thing I would say about our endowment is that it has not been a focal point within our church community over the last decade. And there's reasons for that. We went through an economic crisis and had other issues going on with the church that were of greater focus. But I think if we brought more attention back to the endowment, it really could have an opportunity to grow and even be a greater force in our economic future.
Well, very good. Very good. Well, let me turn to you, Susan. And again, to remind everybody, you're Director of Ministry Services at the Foundation. First of all, would you just tell us a little bit about the foundation? TJ referenced you as being our investment firm for our endowment. Tell us a little bit about the history of the foundation and what it is you all do for the conference and for churches within our conference, such as Providence UMC.
I'm happy to, and thank you for having me join this call with the two of you. We've been in conversation, and so this is exciting to have this conversation. So the United Methodist Foundation was created by the conference to support the churches and other United Methodist organizations. We've got 5 colleges, 3 retirement communities, a host of United Methodist organizations like United Methodist Men and Women. Our sole purpose is to support the financial ministries of our organizations and churches. And so we were created by the conference, but we are our own standalone 501c3 with a separate board of directors. And so we really look to do anything to support the financial ministries of our organizations. And so in this way, we work with churches and organizations to create the endowment documents. So back in the day, so whoever was here in the office would have worked with the folks at Providence to actually create that document, TJ, that you referenced. We then manage endowments for churches and organizations. So we actually manage that according to an investment model, which is built, was uniquely created for our foundation for long-term growth and passive income generation, which is that earnings income piece. And so it's important to us that everyone know that we are invested according to the social responsible principles as outlined in the Book of Discipline. That's a little bit different than some of the other investment models. That's really important to us because it lives into those United Methodist principles. So for our foundation, we are currently the 4th largest United Methodist foundation in the connection. And we are proud of that, not just because we're the 4th largest, but that means we really, really embrace our mission to support our churches, retirement communities, and colleges. And that gives us a lot of ability to reach out and support you.
And I think that's important. And so just to make sure everybody understands, when you reference the connection, you're talking about the entire United States and beyond, but in terms of foundations. So we're not just talking about locally, and we're number 4 across that. So that speaks well.
Correct. Texas and Florida and Oklahoma are the 3 foundations. And of course, Texas also encompasses New Mexico. And then you've got Florida and Oklahoma. And then we, as half of the state of Western North Carolina, which of course that encompasses 1,000 churches. And again, the 5 colleges and 3 retirement communities. So we're really proud of that because to be the 4th largest means we've really had a lot of outreach and ability to share our message to support the churches, to be able to help them grow ministry. That's what we exist for. That's why my feet hit the floor every morning.
Well, and I think that's an important point you raise, because you're not just an investment firm. You are a partner in ministry with the churches of our conference, and thus you are also a resource for us as far as these kinds of issues and beyond, but especially something such as the endowment, but in other ways in which we can help ourselves grow financially. You're, again, a partner helping us in that regard.
Absolutely. Very, very passionate about being a partner with Plan Giving. We can do Plan Giving seminars. We actually just today worked with someone to create a donor advised fund whereby she will use the foundation as her charitable giving outlet to United Methodist organizations, all kind of ways. We have a loan program, a clergy loan program. So there's a lot of financial services that we provide outside of the realm of what we're focusing on today with the endowment, but that in some way all really tie back to that, to help the conference and the churches be stronger.
And so in that partnership, let's assume that there's folks who are listening to this today or watching this, and they're saying, I'd like to give to the endowment. Can you, as the endowment, assist individuals with regard to that process?
Absolutely.
So what would be your advice as far as that, if a member of our congregation would like to follow up, what would you suggest that they do at this point?
Well, and there's so many different ways. There's because we manage your endowment. If someone wants to support the endowment, they can either reach out to you and let you know they want to support your endowment, or they can reach directly out to us at the foundation and support the endowment. And of course, then we would communicate back with the church that you've received an endowment gift. So we try to make it as easy for you and your members to support your endowment as possible.
And this may be in what TJ had said, but just to be clear, I think a lot of times people are drawing from their income during the course of the year to support the general budget of the church. But oftentimes, endowments are built through estate planning. Is that correct?
Often, that's true. So there's often a conversation about and questions about how does the endowment impact the annual budget and annual giving. So typically people support their annual budgets through income, and people typically support endowments through assets. And that can happen as people are planning their estates. That can happen if someone is interested, for instance, in generating lifetime income for themselves with some of their assets and then want to leave something to the church. So for instance, a charitable trust could be used where someone sets up a charitable trust, they receive a lifetime income from that trust, and then upon their deaths, the residual amount in the trust would benefit the church. And those are really, really advantageous to people who have, for instance, stocks. I worked with one gentleman who had bought, and this is for a church up in the mountains, that I worked with the individual, but the church was completely the beneficiary. In his words to me, he had bought Amazon stock for next to nothing and felt held captive by it because of the capital gains. So what he ended up doing was he donated those stocks to create a trust, which he and his wife will then benefit with life income, and the residual of that will go to create a significant endowment for the church. But he had stock that he had bought for much less than $100,000 that had appreciated to over $500,000. So he felt like he was really stuck with what to do with that because he would pay so much in capital gains. Whereas if he used it to create a charitable instrument, it was all capital gains free. And then he was able to do something to really live into his ministerial and calling for those funds. So it was a win-win for him.
That's
and now
wonderful.
He's getting income on about $500,000.
Well, that's wonderful and a great blessing to the church. Well, with the time we have left, is there anything else that you'd like for us to hear from the United Methodist Foundation as far as our endowment is concerned?
I really want to applaud Providence for your endowment. I think it's so important that you realize and people realize the idea that the church has an endowment really speaks to the future of the church. And TJ, going back to what you were saying about the people who came before you, it reminds me always of that saying where we say, we stand on the shoulders of giants. And that's really what this is. When people have created an endowment and people continue to support an endowment, it really does lead for the future. And it shows people that you're going to be very planful and thoughtful with gifts that they've accumulated over their entire lifetime.
Thank you for that. And thank you again for being with us today, Susan. We appreciate you so much. TJ, any last words from you as far as our church's endowment is concerned?
Yeah, thank you, Susan. And Susan's just been a wonderful partner, and everything that she was discussing about the Methodist Foundation is true. They do a fantastic job, and they're always supporting Providence. Whenever we ask, they pick up the phone and get in the car if they need to. Mm-hmm. What I would leave this group with, this audience with, is our plan for 2020 really was to get the word out about the endowment. It's a great tool, a great opportunity for Providence, and because we have not promoted it over the last few years for various reasons, we really wanted to use 2020 as the launching point to make sure that folks knew that we had an endowment, to understand how they might be able to participate and provide that information. And obviously with COVID and all that's happened, that is, we've been unable to advance that in the way we did. So what I would leave everyone with is our hope is in 2021, in the years forward, that people not only understand that we have an endowment, but understand how it works and how it might fit their giving, whether it's now or in the future, and understand how that all works, and to ask questions. And so I would just leave that I remain a resource, the committee remains a resource. I know you remain a resource. Our business manager and Natalie remains a resource, and Susan's a resource to get information about the endowment, ask questions. There's no obligation, but I think it's healthy to ask questions. And I think the more questions you ask, the more it sells itself, and the opportunities for people to think about, would this be something they want to get involved with, would grow. And so I would just ask, let this conversation be a starting point and not an ending point about this subject.
Thank you, TJ. Below this video, we'll have some links. Susan has provided us with some documents that I think will be very helpful for those who want to dig in a little deeper as to the endowment and some of the information from the United Methodist Foundation. So thank you, Susan, for that as well. And I would just, in closing, say that both of you have been made it, one thing, a common theme that's been in what you've said has been this notion of looking to the future. There are not that many ways in which we can have a lasting impact on those around us. And in terms of our church, the endowment provides, I think, a beautiful vehicle to do just that. Every year, the church can be impacted by the gifts that are given to the endowment. We have benefited from them, as TJ has pointed out, and Lord willing, our church will continue to benefit from them for years and years to come. So if you are prayerfully considering this, I echo what TJ said, just contact one of us, reach out to the church, and we appreciate so much those who have given already, those giants whose shoulders we're standing on. As Susan said, we're grateful to so many who have made this possible. So thank you both, and God bless you all.